I just simply don't understand the people who support Hamas. That would be the equivalent, at least the way I see it, is supporting ISIS, essentially depraved terrorist organization. Now, being concerned about the Palestinian people, I think, is not only understandable. I think it should be the case. So I think there is the balance, because war is ugly, but it has to be fought within certain bounds, and we've set that internationally. And I do think, everybody's jumping to the conclusion that the Israelis perhaps went too far. I think that's to be determined, but certainly the level of civilian casualties is unacceptable. As Secretary Blinken said, I would share that. But now we're seeing a lot of things done to move civilians to the south to get out of the area of the most significant fighting, which is important. I think there should be set up a safe zone where people can receive food and water, and it's monitored so that the Hamas fighters can't hide amongst those folks. But we're going to see an increasingly violent fight in Gaza City. It's already started, but it's far from over. And that objective of the Israeli Defense Forces is to destroy Hamas. And that can only be done up close and personal.
I do want to come back to Secretary Blinken in a moment. But first, Mick, would love if you could tell us a bit more the perspective that you're coming at this from. I see that you worked at the Department of Defense, so you were the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Defense for the Middle East in the federal government, and now you're a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute. Can you just tell us what that means and what your role is right now?
So I started, for the most part, as a practitioner of irregular warfare in general, as a Marine, and then as what's called a paramilitary officer in the CIA, which is our version of the special operations in the agency. So I spent most of my time in conflict zones, as did most of my colleagues. And I fought many times in urban environments, and it is by far the worst. It's very disoriented, it's very violent, and you just never know what's coming at you. So that's what I brought into being a policy person for Secretary Mattis and then Secretary Esper, was mostly a practitioner's point of view. But then I got obviously schooled up pretty quick on policy. So I view it from both lenses when I look and analyze these type of conflicts.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I think I was definitely want to know a bit more about your background here. Very impressive. So you were also a former coach at USA Boxing in the Marines for a few years. So very impressive pedigree. And I wanted to echo Matt in thanking you for your service as well.
A few years in the Marines from 1988 to 2014.
Yeah, that's
solid.
More than a few. Yeah. So you certainly have a lot more to bring to the table than we do in this perspective. So yeah, I did want to come back, to Secretary Blinken's visit then, and what you made of his time in the Middle East and how his reaction was, and where basically the U.S.'s role is in this conflict right now.
So I think one of the roles that the U.S. is attempting to play is to talk about the day after. This is going to happen. I believe Hamas will be destroyed, as they should be. But what's going to come next? A long-term occupation of the IDF of Gaza would be unacceptable to many, and I don't think it would be in their interest. So what's going to fill the gap? I think Secretary Blinken's been talking to all our partners in the region, saying, rhetorically, having opinions on this is fine, but what are we actually going to do? So is there going to be an international peacekeeping force? What's going to be the political way ahead for the people in Gaza, the Palestinians? What are we going to do to make sure that this never happens again? Both for the sake of Israel, of course, and for the sake of the Palestinian people. And I think everything that I've seen Secretary Blinken saying is indicating that is really where he wants to focus this. How to reduce this human tragedy that's happening in Gaza and eliminate Hamas, and also look at what's going to come next to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Now, Mick, a lot of people would say Israel has occupied Gaza for quite a long time and continue to do so through October 7th. They certainly have occupied the West Bank in a large part and haven't honored any of the attempts at a two-state solution, not under Netanyahu, right? So is there any hope that they're going to do that now? Because everyone else in the world backs a two-state solution, even the countries like the U.S. that back Israel and send Israel billions of dollars every year, and yet the Israelis refuse to allow the Palestinians to have their own state.
And the only way I could see this ever working, where we don't have this happen again and again, is a two-state solution. They have essentially to your point, they have direct access into the West Bank and therefore occupy it. They control in and out access in Gaza. They would say they didn't occupy it, which is one of the reasons why they didn't know what was going on.
Well, they have settlements, they have checkpoints.
They do. They absolutely do. Yes, I'm not disagreeing with you, but they would say that they want to have troops on the ground now because they don't want Hamas to get reconstituted. I think that would be a bad idea. That's why I think Secretary Blinken, State Department, the White House is rightfully talking about, well, what's the alternative? Is there a caretaker type group, an international peacekeeping force that could stay there until the Palestinian people select a government that sets up its security, it sets up its basic life support, and then of course there should be large investments from a lot of the wealthy countries in the region and out of the region that help rebuild Gaza and turn it into a place that has a future, including an economic one. And I think that's what the U.S. is pushing now, and I think they should be, because this situation I don't see changing unless there is a two-state solution in which the international community is heavily involved in setting up.
Are we losing sight of what's going on in Ukraine through all this? Because if the Russians win there, they're pushing up into NATO borders.
They absolutely are. And the fight's still raging on in Ukraine, even though it's not first thing on the news. It's still happening, and they are making incremental gains. And it's really clear now that a lot of the weapon systems that we provided them recently, especially the ATACMS, the long-range artillery system, is having a major effect on the Russians' ability to resupply both its frontline troops, and they can reach anywhere in Ukraine now with those systems. So there's no place off limits, including the Crimean Peninsula. So that is super important. It's also really important that we get more funding to them to purchase and buy ammunition, because as this gets into the winter, it's going to be somewhat of a war of attrition, particularly on the logistical side. And the U.S. needs to help them keep up with a much larger, much broader enemy in Russia.